So with that, like I said, diversions were pretty good for Myanmar, but once that's gone, then what is your next play if you're Myanmar? Are you able to go toe-to-toe with the lead that Indonesia was having? Because even at this point in the game, 7 minutes in, it was nothing crazy. The lead wasn't anything out of control just yet. But with punishing plays like this and good just timing from, ultimates like the Blazing Duet, the Feathered Airstrike, and even just the setup potential from Indonesia's lineup really helped them out. Myanmar was in this game, I would say, even at this point in the game, but slowly but surely it slipped out of their hands. And when we get to eventually that first Lord, that's really where it got just kind of snowballed in favor of Indonesia. Great flicker play from Sans, very, key style of him to do on this Varso. Like I said, he's picked it up a couple times to the group stages and has had phenomenal performances so far. And even Albert on this Baksha almost played like an assassin. He was everywhere. Whether he got 2 Guardian helmets or not, he was everywhere he needed to be on the Baksha, played it very well. And this is what you want to do when you see a Fredrin across from you. The Fredrin was first pick for Myanmar, and they played into it really well by just picking up a Baksha. Nothing too fancy. Honestly, when you look at this game, Indonesia didn't do anything too fancy. It was very foundational skills. The Masha was probably the most fancy thing about it just because it's such a glass cannon, with the Sky Piercer Rush. But everything was very fundamental here from Indonesia, and it got them that win in a very quick fashion, 12-30 on this, and with a pretty big lead too. And things kind of, like I said, with the draft they had, it just fell into place for them really well here. The damage that you got to see just pumped out from Mlbb, an XP laner on a Masha, is what makes it so scary. Like, Mlbb out-damaged the gold lane and the mid lane. That's probably why, some people are like, hey, take out this Masha, especially when you're facing against Indonesia. Very, very strong performance here from Mlbb, and just overall from Indonesia as a team. Myanmar is really going to have to kind of get things situated and figure it out for the next draft, as, we're most likely going to see them get those 2 picks they're looking for based off the priority pick for Indonesia when they flip sides and everything. And they can really start from there because, I don't know, the Dairoth just ended up not working, I feel like, the way they wanted to, or Masha was just the perfect answer to kind of deal with it. The rest of the lineup from Myanmar I actually really liked. It's just, by the time the game got to this point, 12 minutes in, Juno couldn't shine the way he has before, like we've seen on a Nathan. That's why I think the Nathan ban was also very good and it was on point.
Yeah, respect, right? I think the Natan was just, it makes a whole lot of sense, the fact that, at least for Myanmar, they've been able to get all of their wins with the Natan. Even up against Cambodia, if it wasn't a Natan in game number 1, game number 3, when they actually went for a Claude in game number 2 against Cambodia, that was the game that they actually lost. So maybe that is a bit of maybe for the side of Myanmar that Indonesia were able to exploit. They forced the marksman to be picked up in the second phase, and then they banned out the Natan, banning out that signature pick. And like you said, Albert, he's a tank. He's a Baksha, but the Baksha can deal a whole lot of damage. We've already been talking about this all the way from the African regional qualifiers, how broken this hero is. And even, some pro players deciding, even though he's the only magic damage dealer on the opposing team, sometimes they would even still go for the Radiant armor, for the Athena shield as well. Some of these just to try to take in and soak in the damage that comes in from the Poisons, from his constant skill 2s, and even from the shield unity. The base damage alone, with the help of the concussive blast, it lets you become a fighter and a tank at the same time. And I again wanna see if he actually did go for the 2 Sky Guardian helmets, if that was actually a mistake that he made, because it looked like, for a dominating game for Indonesia, it looked like he shouldn't have just 3 items. He should have way more, or at least 1 more item. So I think that might have been like a real mistake that he did.
I was trying to actually go back in the stream and see like what it was that he did, but I think the fact that, it was a 12.5-minute game. Yeah, because he only had like a couple items there on the Baksha and they were like pretty massively ahead. I think it was a mistake because then once you buy it and then you have to sell it, you lose quite a bit of gold, in that exchange. So, but either way, like I said, for Albert specifically here, what we've seen from the group stage is just, again, a very dynamic player. Not only is he dynamic in game, but he spoke pure English yesterday in the interview, which still I was like, man, that's dynamics right there. So, he's played these assassin picks where he's gone like 16-0. And now he plays the Baksha like this too, and I think it was the perfect fit for this lineup because you're just letting the other lanes really shine with this. Like, they're the ones to do the damage. You're not the assassin anymore, and that showed because Mlbb shining on the damage department. You know, in terms of like even against a Claude and a Claude, okay, because Claude takes a little more time to build up and get the blazing duet off. But like even to out damage a Farsa, like that was a surprise to me, and I think it just shows how dominant Mlbb was on the Masha pick. So I'm almost expecting, as we wait for the draft for game 2, Myanmar will ban out the Masha. They don't want to deal with it. Maybe this is the time too, like, and they'll probably respect ban Ling still. But I could also just see Indonesia putting an assassin this time if they want to on Albert. Let him have his game now that he's had this Baksha, this Baksha game in the game number 1, and then kind of build from that, because I feel like too, depending on how the bans go, priority wise could still be up in the air so far, man. And it's like, even when I watch the Lo Yi, she's struggling, and I don't know why. The diversions were good, but why is Lo Yi not winning games? Not just here for Myanmar, but like multiple teams. I feel like she's really struggling, and so I don't know if it's just the diversion alone. There's something has happened here, America. I'm not sure what it is, but I think she's still good, and teams will still pick her up. There's definitely something happening with the Lo Yi.
She's definitely been capped. I think she's definitely just been limited down, right? Because the fact that her ultimate now, the diversion, has been increased, I think it's to like it's quite long actually, especially for stage 1, right? When you've just leveled it up level 1, it just, oh man, that duration for the cooldown is a bit too long. And you can see that for Lo Yi, at least, what made her really strong, on top of obviously having crazy base damage like you mentioned, that is still why she can actually still be picked in the first phase. That's the only reason. Because if it's purely just for the diversion, if let's say she's a late game pick, she's not going to be picked up at all right? She already has that snowballing potential, and even with the diversion getting nerfed, you can still deal a lot of damage. But when the opposing team is able to just weather the storm of that early game damage and also read out the diversions, that's when you have a big problem. For most of the teams that have been, even trying out the Lo Yis, it's still been coming back to hurt them. Indonesia tried to play that against Malaysia, and again, Malaysia were able to weather out the storm in the early game up against that Lo Yi, and also they were able to catch all of the diversions. The diversions won't be as creative as they used to be, because now you can't take those crazy risks anymore. I think we saw I think in that game as well, Justin used the diversion in towards like the bush right in front of the purple buff. You remember that? And right as they saw that, they were like, all right, let's go for the Lord. They knew that there was no way for the diversion to be up again within the time span of them taking the Lord. So that in itself is already a big weakness that a lot of teams can exploit for the Lo Yi. You can't even feint anymore. You can't do that anymore because it's just so readable now. And back to your point where you actually were talking about the Masha, I would love to see the Masha banned out too, especially against Mlbb. But the thing is, they're going to have to ban it out in the second phase, I feel. Because in the first phase, it's a Ling, Chip, and Angela. Those are the 3 bans that Myanmar went for. And now, especially considering Indonesia will most likely be on blue. Not sure, again, if this is actually going to be the case, right? But even if they stay red, I think it'll still be the same bans. It'll still be Ling, it'll still be Chip, and Angela. Those 3 heroes are just so good for Indonesia, and you really, really can't afford to give it away to them. One way I see it, like the Masha fit in the first phase, is through Ken picking up the Ling or through them going for the Chip. They need to pick what they banned out in the first game if they want to go and let go of 1 slot to go and replace it for a Masha ban. But the safe choice would be, hey, Mlbb picked it up in the second phase. He's never picked it up in the first phase, at least not yet. You can play that gamble, hope that it doesn't get picked in the first phase, and maybe ban it out in the second phase. But then if it does get picked up in the first phase, we got to start thinking about counters here. The Dairoth was not it. The Dairoth was not a lane that does well against the Masha, at least not there. I don't know if it was the execution or if it just fundamentally loses up in the matchup.
I was trying to think, because after you mentioned it, I was like, I think there was a point when Masha was, for some teams, like in different professional leagues, like it was picked up first pick. Like there was a time when it did happen, when she started to rise again through the ranks, and it was either she was flexed as even a roam or she was put in the XP lane. This time around, though, it is going to be Indonesia on this blue side, and then you'll have Myanmar on the red side. And I know, for Indonesia, like you said, these bans are quite similar. Angela is actually going to be taken out by them, the Fermis as well. There's the Ling, the Respect. So, you know, I think it's really up to Myanmar. Like, how do they want to go about that first phase for themselves, depending on what's given up here. And Indonesia, they can really go a couple different ways. Like, they could go in priority an assassin pick early off the bat. They don't have to. They could also, something that's happened with a lot of the games for Indonesia, and I think is a big part of the like drafting phase, is the fact that you have quite a bit of flexibility with Keyboy. Keyboy, if you look at the heroes that he's played so far, even through the group stage, like he's phenomenal on the Edith. Like, we've already seen that. But yesterday he even picked up the Guinevere roam. You know, and how many massive plays did he make on the Guinevere roam? So, you know, when you have roamers like this on certain teams, it's difficult to go through the draft, and really, you kind of just have to pick your poison when it comes to, you know, these bans and what you're willing to give up, because you can only have so many bans. And that's the R lot that is going to be taken out here for the last ban for the first phase from Indonesia. Myanmar, we'll see what they answer with. Again, there's a whole lot on the table. I think even lately, we've seen so many contests for the Edith pickup from men's and women's. And Edith alone as a hero is probably one of the more successful roams right now, setting up for team. I would say, for Indonesia at least, the Grok. We saw this ban out before, but wow, it's the Lui Yi. So Myanmar took the task of banning out the Chip and the Lui Yi, and so the response is Harith over here.
They let the Harith go, and technically they also leave the Roger go. So I honestly, with the Loyi ban, it makes sense. I was about to say, you know, before they actually banned the Loyi, that the Harith and Roger will definitely be something in their minds. But letting go of both will be great for them, because then they can actually just decide to react to the pick, whichever, you know, Indonesia go for. If they go for the Roger first, Myanmar will react with the Harith. If if Harith gets picked up, they'll go with the Roger. So vice versa. We'll see now. Myanmar, I think one slot will definitely be used for the Roger. But now that the Frederick gets picked up, if they do go for the Roger, but now technically it already kind of deletes that flex potential from the game. Roger won't be going into the jungle unless the Fredrin goes XP. And I gotta be honest with you, Naisu, I am a Fredrin XP hater. I am the #1 Fredrin XP hater, right?
Why?
I just hate how, you know how, like, you know, in the XP you want to go for brawls? The Fredrin's like, nah. I don't want to. Yeah, he just wants us the same.
I'd
Good
win.
Nolan pick though. I'd win, but you know, he eventually he never wins, but he never loses. He's just a non-lane.
It's a
dead
lane.
Gets picked as well. And the Nolan's going to be a great pick here. If the Fredrin does go for the towards the jungle, this is what Indonesia have been able to utilize. I think yesterday as well, the multiple layers of damage and the versatility that you get with the Nolan and the Harith. You can go back and forth. You can also still kite, but obviously the #1 way to win with this composition is go for the initial burst, lock them down, and burst them down on the spot.
Man, I'm glad you pointed that out too, because I'm also wondering, like, if Myanmar picked up the Fredrin like a little bit early here, but you know, because you already know where things are going into place. Okay, Tigreal is what they grab up. I would like to see them ban out Guinevere. I don't know if it's actually worth a ban for Myanmar, but this lineup, when we saw at least the Harith and Nolan, the Guinevere was for Keyboy. And that was what helped, like, the setups with just having a Guinevere for those two heroes alone, and now you have a penalty zone. It was nasty, man. So I feel like for Myanmar, I might think about banning out the Guinevere, letting that be one of the bans here. But, you know, at least they answer it. Hey, they have a Tigreal, pretty good implosion setups that can happen with this lineup, especially when you're fighting into a possible penalty zone, being the initiation. You know, that happens a lot of times so far from when we see Terizla's locked in. It's just, you want to be able to fight into that, because that's going to be a Zaman Force also being dropped down. So they do go with a roam ban, but it's going to be a Grok instead. And so far, like I was saying before, I think, you know, Keyboy's versatility as a player and his hero pool is kind of what makes this lineup so strong, or just Keyboy so strong in general, is the fact that you can ban out some of the key heroes he picks, but then he kind of just like curveballs and picks a Guinevere, who there are not many roams that are actually confident enough to pick a Guinevere and then play it to the way that he did, like especially yesterday. So Now, for Indonesia, on the other hand, what do they want to ban out here? You know, some mages, some more mages maybe they could take out, you know, for the mid lane being an option. Wow, a Paquito. Not expecting that because, man, we have not seen much Paquito throughout this entire ISF run.
Not at all. I don't think we've seen a single Paquito game in the entire ISF for African regional qualifiers combined with the Asian regional qualifiers. So
he popped up in women's today. I remember watching a tournament Rashi. He just popped up once. So that's like, I think, the first time, man.
Yeah, the fact that it's only popped out once, right, means that I don't know about the Paquito. Maybe in these matchups up against the Yuzong, the Terizlas, you know, the two super prio heroes, it just doesn't do too well. Or maybe it's just because now you're kind of forced to commit into these team fights, not so much play the Lord dance anymore, right? But for Myanmar, like you said, I completely agree with you, by the way. The Guinevere makes perfect sense for Indonesia. There's so much value here. Number one, you get the Viral Requiem. That in itself is already an anti-CC that you can utilize to get out of these engages coming in from the Tigreal. They actually go for the Masha ban as well. So 2 XP bans towards Ruby DD. A lot of respect placed down as they've already revealed their own XP lane with the Terizla. But another reason why the other 2 reasons why it's great is because, number 1, or number 2 actually, the number 1 we already got earlier, is it is a great lockdown hero, a good setter to set up for the Nolan and the Herod damage to come through, and to even set up for the penalty zone to just find a more reliable hit.
Yeah.
But then the final reason has got to be the Fredrin. I think back then when Fredrin was ultra meta, the way that you would actually try to counter it in the jungle would be the Guinevere. The Guinevere will be a solid answer to go for the retreat battles because you could actually just go away with the spatial migration, get the stun, and it kind of works in a way similar to the Akai. You CC your opponent to get 100-0 retreat, to win out in the retreat battle. And because of the range changes, now the Guinevere we don't see too much in the jungle, but I think for Keyboy, you can still make it work. It's a good Novaria pick though. I think that will kind of stop and give the Guinevere a hurdle if they do still decide to go for the Guinevere. Because on the Guinevere, you're very reliant on these ambushing attacks. You need to play outside of the vision, right? You have to play within the pockets there, back and forth. Because if you get read out, it's pretty easy to predict, you know, a spatial migration coming in from the Guinevere. You can see it in their eyes almost.
You can see it in their eyes if you were in the first-person view in the Land of Dawn, you know? There it is. I was saying, you know, we saw this iteration already, these combination of heroes with some minor changes. Instead of the Terizla yesterday, it was an Arlot. And instead of the Valentina, yes, it was a Loi Yi. Loi Yi was actually picked up. So, you know, the core 3 there, though, that made it so deadly was the Guinevere, the Nolan, for the most part. Like, early game snowball potential is really there. So I think for Myanmar, as they go in for their last pick, they really need to have a kind of a plan in mind. It's going to be the XP lane, unless this is a crazy flex with the Fredrin. Not sure if that's going to happen, though. But the Yuzhong is open. Not sure if they actually want to do that, or maybe possibly go with something we haven't seen yet. I'm just assuming, you know, they go Yuzhong because that's Yuzhong and Terizla matchup we've seen so many times throughout the ISF groups, and they go Cho. Okay, so they go the Cho pick, which you're gonna put in the XP lane. What do you think? You think that's good? Do you think this is a good choice?
We did see the Cho yesterday, right? I believe Myanmar versus Thailand, Ruby DD actually did play the Cho in the XP. Yeah. So technically, we've already seen that before. He was also able to win, but I was against Thailand. And now against this composition, there's so much anti-CC, so many dashes. I guess the one member you can go for the pickoffs on would be the Nolan. Right now, with the Fracture also, no more, you know, CC immunity, no more kind of built-in Purify with the Fracture. So technically, I see the idea. And especially now that the Cho has been buffed in a way where in the lane, he actually does a lot more damage. That passive has the physical defense shreds. It'll work towards the Roger as well later on in the game. And if you go for these pickoffs, and with Ji Kundo, it allows you to go for the trades a bit more reliably now compared to before when it was a bit shorter. But I'm not a big fan of the Cho in the XP. I think you all know why.
Well, let's find out here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's game number 2. Match point for Indonesia to move forward and advance to qualifying for the WEC in Riyadh. All they need is this one win to move forward. Myanmar, can they extend the series to get to the 3-game? We're going to have to take a look at this exactly because, yeah, like we said, there's a whole lot of Purifies here to deal with a lot of the CC that Myanmar has available to them. And look at this, already early rotations happening here for Juno. But, you know, one thing too, I'm not sure if anyone's going to get a kill with this early on with this lineup, but with Ruby DD running, like you said, this kind of new Cho, having that passive, I think it's like 180% is what you get with that bonus attack. But then you have a concussive blast. So I'm wondering how the lineup or how the matchup with even going against a Terizla performs in terms of like the numbers and being able to stay, or is it just purely I'm going to go and try to get some pickoffs, you know, because right now they're just duking it out. And you can see Mlbb also went up with the Brave Smite. So once he goes with War Axe, most likely he'll be able to just kind of stay in the lane as long as he wants to. So on mid lane, still Albert trying to find early pickoffs, but I just don't think it's going to happen here until these level 4s, especially that Turtle's still 30 seconds away. But look at this, Ken fighting for his own XP, and Albert will go ahead and just continue on with this.
I think, you know, with Brave Smite, hold on. Down below, Lycan Pounce, Juno going to be caught in the spatial migration as well. Does have the Purify to get out, but the damage is certainly there. Juno will have to respect it by backing away. But back to the Brave Smite. So most Terizlas that we've seen, especially with the War Axe change, they go for the Impure Rage to get more mana, and then they just go and rely on the sustainability of the War Axe. So the fact that he's doubling down means he's ready for Myanmar's you know, full-on team fight and the longer team fights. As Albert starts his turtle, Keyboy's hovering over, doesn't have that level 4 just yet, but has already been able to shove in that bottom lane, or that mid lane actually. Good Astral Echo, and that's giving the spatial migration. Albert with the fracture, not even, actually, will be able to go for it. Now penalty zone locking him down with the Violent Requiem. Albert picking up the first blood, as Zide will be forced to run away, but even then, the Retribution slows him down, gives Albert the movement speed to catch back up and to take him out. A 2-0 start for Indonesia.
Man, this is what I was saying even yesterday, Mirko. Like, once Albert gets snowballing on any of the assassins that he picks up, he's going to continue to just be very aggressive. So you got to be, if you're Myanmar, you got to be able to answer this. And that might just be also protecting Ken a little bit more, because that pressure could get a little overwhelming. You're seeing nothing locked in first item-wise yet for both teams, but Indonesia getting themselves already 2K ahead against Myanmar with all those exchanges is where they usually start their games. It starts a little bit slower, they get the advantage going, and then it snowballs out of control. We saw this the last time, like I said, continuously with this lineup, these three heroes, the Keyboy on that Guinevere, you have Albert on the Nolan, and of course a CW on the Harith. There's a ton of damage potential that can happen here early on. And for Myanmar, they have tanky enough heroes. But, you know, that's kind of what they're hoping for, that we're just tanky and durable enough to deal with the burst damage that can come through. I mean, even look at this. Ken.
Spatial migration again with the Violent Requiem straight into the Fracture, and Zide will be able to get the implosion down. Sans, an implosion as well, not connecting anyone, but Zide will still be melted down slowly but surely for Albert to pick up a killing spree in the first 3 minutes of the game. Deja vu to game 1 yesterday, or game 2.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying, though? Like Myanmar, they drafted this because they're like, I hope we're tanky enough to go and deal with this burst, but it's just showing that they're not. And a lot of that has to do with the way Indonesia is cycling through their CC. And that's whether, and we talked about this extensively in the draft, that Keyboy was probably going to pick up the Guinevere, and I'm surprised that it actually wasn't banned out for the last ban from Myanmar, because it works wonders with this lineup. So now that this turtle's up here, Myanmar, despite them being down already, you know, 3,000-4,000 gold, they do still want to fight for this objective. And as long as they at least, you know, watch out for Keyboy setting up just like that, that's good. They don't get set up, so at least, you know, they avoid it for now, but still they have to win this battle. Echo going to be dropped down too. They get the vision, but still both teams are ready to go for it. It's going to be a full-on fight.
The penalty zone onto Ken, now with the implosion as well, locking him down. Mlbb dealing a lot of damage. Ken will be taken out, but just with the hammer swings as CW jumps with the synchro vision, and Albert gets rid of the frontliners. Juno completely zoned away. They're being overwhelmed by damage. Another spatial migration into the Violent Requiem. Keyboy finding an angle to attack again, and Justin doesn't have mana to play with. Oh no, no Astral Recall means that Albert can just walk up Fracture, and now the Lethal Ignition taking down slowly but surely. Albert fadeaway kill under the tier 2 as he now goes for the steal. I don't think he'll be able to do so. Ken has the Retribution, but man, Albert's already 3 levels ahead.
Oh, Awesome. We're going to take a look at this replay here on how this kind of unfolded. And like I was saying, you know, Myanmar, I'm surprised they really do want to go and fight for this because, wow, that's all in reverse, by the way. So it's all in reverse, I think. But
Dynamics, bro.
Dynamics, the dynamics. But, you know, as we saw that unfold, it was Myanmar just choosing to fight for that. And honestly, it didn't work out for them the way they wanted it to. And Albert also, with that whole exchange, now picks up the Sky Piercer. And look at Keyboy. Like, this is just how confident Keyboy is with this Guinevere. Given the information, he's the walking ward.
Facial migration, only onto the orange buff. Albert decides to just take it away from Ken. Being 4 levels ahead, it does, you know, look quite easy to go for these steals. But, man, the fact that he was... What is up with Albert on the Assassins? It just... Do you remember last game? You know, he played the Baksha. It looked like, okay, he's good. But on the Assassins, it's a different level entirely. Ruby DD. The Kudo, I don't think you can really even go for this. Loopy going to be able to out-damage Ruby DD. And that's right, Keyboy! Again with a Violent Requiem, locking just enough as Loopy goes in for the hammer swing. And Keyboy gets out. Albo with Fracture now. CW goes over the spot for Sans again with the Implosion Steal to corral them together for that collapse. 11-0. Cool. And now it's going to be Ruby DD who gets slain by CW.
My goodness, just like yesterday. The same thing is happening with this lineup that just has a few changes, but what the heck? Indonesia just pulling forward again. Myanmar, you guys have to understand, Myanmar was basically undefeated in the group stage. They just dominated time and time again, and now Indonesia, even though they lost in the group stage, at this point it looks like they are playing perfectly with this lineup, with this composition of heroes even. And Albert, yet to be killed, yet to be stopped, picks up a Malefic Roar. I don't even know what Myanmar can do at this point. They have to somehow, some way allow Juno to get online. And this is exactly why I say, man, I don't like Roger in the gold lane. I'd rather have him in the jungle because it's just so difficult for him to farm up at this point to get the space that he needs to work with. And I mean, you're looking at the disparity in terms of the gold. He's also just very far behind CW right now. He hasn't died, which is great, but look at all the setup potential you have with these heroes, and you have no follow-up. If he enters, if Juno tries to go in, even Lycan pounce in, he's probably going to get blown up before he gets a chance to get a hit off. You know, that's the troubling part about having this Roger in the gold lane. And so now you're forced, hold on.
Keyboy going to be locked down. By the way, the Dragon as well, and Keyboy will be locked down by everything in the kitchen sink to get Myanmar their first kill in the game. CW going for the chase though. Options him on force, will not be able to fully go for that kill onto Juno, who still has the Purify, but Indonesia wanna utilize this resource advantage now. As Ruby DD walks up again with the Shun Pool, it's gonna be Albert walking up, dealing some damage back onto Ken, forcing him to half HP as Sans deals with them in the back as well, isolating and zoning them away from this tier 2 in the mid lane.
Oh, Sans also picks up the Implosion, so we might have to keep an eye on a possible play. Doesn't have a flicker, it went with the Purify instead, but can still possibly use that in a quite a surprising way. You'll have to see it unfold. Taking a look at the items real quick too, you can see them coming into place already. CW has those 3 items working on the next here. Could be a Holy Crystal next, or just going into even some more penetration, because right now there's just too much damage overloading Myanmar. When they get a pick off with Ruby DD, it's great, but he has to do so much work to get it through. So as they try to defend this tier 2 turret, look at this. Albert's just going to go ahead and start up the Lord. He doesn't need the rest of the team to come here. They can just keep this, you know, Myanmar at bay from even entering their jungle. Ruby DD, like, just trying to make something happen will just get poked down, you know, and that's just Sans. Sans is 0-0 and 10. It's nearly impossible to get the kill on this Valentina. So with that, Myanmar is going to find themselves once again on the defensive, trying to hold on the best they can. For Indonesia, with the tools they have and the fact that Sans has an Implosion, they could possibly force this situation in here. And shields are going to be popped already before that Lord even gets there. Holy Crystal just picked up by CW, so the damage is now even further ahead for Indonesia in terms of potential. Myanmar on the defense.
A lot of battle spells already back up. Super. Oh, it's gonna be Ken. Just almost decimated there by the fracture. Penalty zone on the 3. Mlbb again with the engage. Now he's going to put Zaman Force onto the back, doing all the damage. Mlbb will lose his life, and Side as well just gets melted down, completely obliterated under the base turret as Indonesia continue the siege. Now into the top lane. That's going to be base turret number 2 taken down as Mlbb zones them again with some damage on that hammer, swinging it by. Ken going to take a little bit of that. Sans again also goes for the splash. Albert looking for the play. Keyboy again with the spatial migration into the winter crown as he pops into Battle Requiem, and look at Justin, who can't even defend. Juno forced back all the way to the fountain, and Mlbb spawns back in. But Indonesia, 16-1, have just dominated Myanmar in a clean sweep.
Oh man, a clean sweep. My goodness, the ending there, like I knew that they were very far ahead, Mirko. I knew that, you know, it was highly likely that Indonesia was going to punch it in there, but usually we see teams being able to clear out the first Lord possibly, and, you know, at least buy a little more time. But Keyboy again on this Guinevere. He did it in the same fashion that they did yesterday in the game 2. Exactly, the Winter Crown. And not only that, but he did the same thing yesterday with hitting 3 targets. But this time it was key because as they got more members off the list, they could punch it in and end the game here. And they get the sweep. And, you know, we don't know exactly what's going to set up for the grand final, but maybe Indonesia is on their route to deal with some revenge towards Malaysia. If Malaysia moves forward, we don't know that just yet because that's the match later on. But right now, they have secured their spot to the WEC in Riyadh later this year. But we'll take a look at the highlights here once again for Indonesia. Very much a highlight reel for them. And it just looked like, you know, straight from the draft, we already knew kind of the game plan from Indonesia because we saw this yesterday and how dominant it was. And you're thinking, you know, Myanmar being undefeated and a great team themselves, they would be able to handle it. And I think when you look at the draft, that was the idea. Let's try to be tanky enough to survive the burst possibility that could happen like we saw from Albert yesterday on this Nolan pick plus the Guinevere. But I think it's just too much. It's you're CC'd for so long with the spatial migration, with the Violent Requiem, and then, you know, you have that burst potential, and that's just the 2 that we're talking about. Even with this fight here in the mid lane, you can just see how overloaded things were for Myanmar so early in the game. I mean, you know, in a similar fashion, Indonesia, they knew their power spikes. They knew how to get control in the early part. They knew how to punish, and that's tough. You see that from Mlbb. This is a good pick off, but earlier, the amount of effort that has to happen here for Mlbb, yeah, to get close to a target, to pick them off, is so difficult. Great penalty zone into the base, under the Zaman Force once again. And that's what makes this so devastating of a combination. Penalty zone, Zaman Force, you're forced to fight in it. There's Keyboy getting that set up to get Ken out. And then they just end the game here. And even CW there on the back, just getting those extra kills, of course. And it was too late. I mean, 16-1. Under 11 minutes from Indonesia. Like, I don't know if this is actually their fastest game in account to some of the off-stream games that they have, but this is dominant.
Fastest stream game for sure.
Fastest stream game for sure, you know, and my goodness, Indonesia just had this game plan in mind from the draft. They executed it perfectly, and they got